Getting up with Craig Way, the voice of the Texas Longhorns, and I know the last 12, 15 months has been a little crazy around Austin. Joining the SEC last year, what was that first trek through the SEC, not just with football, but with every sport? What was it like around there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Colin. And I think what, from a football perspective, last year's first year did for Texas was to give them an opportunity to do a couple of things. One, um, that whole question about is Texas SEC ready? There was that. And by the way, I'm perfectly fine with that question because what it did was it supplanted a lot of the is Texas back? Texas is back stuff. I mean, the Longhorn football program is still paying for the sins of Joe Tessitore, who uttered that, when they had that double overtime win over Notre Dame. But anyway, it gave them a chance to answer the question about are they SEC ready, and they proved that they were. But even more so, I think it gave fans not only in the SEC but across the country, and certainly Longhorn fans, a chance to see all the work that Sark and the staff had put in to build the depth, quality depth, to add is his co-offensive coordinator, the offensive line coach Kyle Flood likes to refer to as big humans. Adding the big humans on the offensive line and the defensive line, I think is a very, very big thing. And I think it gave them a chance to do that. The other sports, I think, kind of fed off of it. Basketball, men's basketball took a little bit of a step back. Obviously, they got into the NCAA tournament but lost in the first four. But now they've made the coaching change. There's a lot of excitement about what Sean Miller may be able to do. And in addition to broadcasting the football and men's basketball, also do the women's basketball. And Vic Schaefer has done a tremendous job there and got them to the Final Four last year. And they shared the SEC regular season title with South Carolina. And baseball in their first year wins the SEC regular season. Had they not lost their number one starter and their number three starter and a reliever to injury 3/4 of the way through the year, they might have had a chance to go deeper than just the regional round. So there's a great, and then softball wins a national championship. So there was a lot of excitement around that first year. And I would say it leads to a lot of anticipation and, yes, expectation for the next year.
Yeah, so leading into more of a football aspect
Sure.
and moving into the SEC, of course, the goal is always to win a national championship, and no matter what division you're in or whatever. And so my question is with coming up a little bit short of that, do you feel like Texas feels like they kind of reached what their goal was last year with their first year being in the SEC, of making the SEC championship and playing for a championship? Again, coming up just short of making it to the national championship, but still proving themselves to be ready, like we say, for the SEC.
Some goals were realized, Brent. Some were, and those were to show how nationally competitive they could be, to go to an Ann Arbor and beat Michigan, to be really, really good on the road. But there were other goals they didn't reach. They lost twice to Georgia, clearly, at home in a game where they really were just outplayed and outmuscled in about every sense of the word. But here in Atlanta, they take Georgia in overtime and had an opportunity, several opportunities to win the game, didn't do it. And then, of course, came back here, and there was another goal realized a couple of weeks later after they had gone into the playoff and won a home playoff game. That's the first time that Texas had won a playoff game, because the year before it was only a 14 field, and they got to the semifinals before losing to Washington. So they won a playoff game, came back here, won that massive double overtime thriller with Arizona State. Again, more goals realized, but the job wasn't finished, and losing to Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl proved that as well. So there was meat left on the bone. There were things out there they still wanted to accomplish, even though by and large they were pleased with a lot of what they did.
Whenever everybody talks about Texas football, especially going into this season, the first thing that seems to come up is Arch Manning and what he is going to be coming up this season. You saw flashes of him last year, but we talked about it a little bit earlier this week. A lot of times when he came into a ball game, you felt like you knew what was going to happen. He was going to be running the football. What does that look like in your estimation, and how overblown is the Arch Manning talk nationally as opposed to what it is in Austin?
Well, first of all, to your first part, the work that he has put in has been impressive to see what he does in terms of command of the offense. Yes, his mobility is a big part of it, but also he has a strong arm and can throw the ball well also. So I think all of that needs to be taken into account. The fact that he's handled everything so well, I think is important. It is interesting. You bring up the how overblown things are in terms of the expectation. Well, it didn't just start last year, and it certainly didn't just start this year. I was upstairs a few minutes ago doing an interview with Arch, and when I got done, and I was talking also to Michael Taff and Anthony Hill, who are here with the Longhorns, who walks into the room to say hi to him but David Cutcliffe. And, of course, Coach Cut had coached Eli at Ole Miss, and he coached at Duke, and he was Peyton's offensive coordinator at Tennessee, and is just a well-respected football mind and a great coach, and now is on the SEC staff. And, of course, he was Eli's college coach. So he told the story that he was still the coach at Ole Miss when Arch was born. And on the morning that Arch was born, Coach Cutcliffe sent a courier with a letter of intent over to the hospital. So the expectation has been there for a while for Arch. So I think he's excited and looking forward. I asked each of those guys what they're looking forward to most once this season gets underway. And one of the things he said was, I'm looking forward to be able to run with the ones on offense.
Yep.
And so I think he's looking forward to that challenge.
Was there a certain area that you would say for Texas last year that kind of maybe underperformed a little bit throughout the season, and you're kind of maybe a question mark going into this season and how they're going to do?
Well, I know they weren't entirely happy with the kicking game, either kicking or punting. Bert Auburn made a lot of big kicks for Texas. He hit 4 out of 6 in the SEC championship game, but he missed 2 out of 3, obviously, in that Peach Bowl. Some important ones there. He left. Wish him well. Hope it goes well for him down in Coral Gables. The fact that they have the transfers in, they do have, and Sark pointed this out when I was visiting with him a few minutes ago. He likes the fact they have a senior kicker, a senior punter, a senior holder, and a senior snapper. So they have addressed that. They have a good return game, but they weren't entirely happy with the kicking game. And there's questions, obviously, with the offensive line being relatively new, even though guys got a lot of reps who will be starters. And then in the secondary, there'll be some young faces. There'll be some veterans like Michael Taff, obviously. And Manny Muhammad wasn't listed as a starter that much last year, but he played an awful lot. So there's some new guys to go with the old.
Whenever you look at the offensive side for Texas, I think a part that gets overlooked across the board is that running back room and how good they were at times, especially last year. You look at Wisner, and Baxter even came into his own, especially late in the season. What is it about that side of the ball that Sark feels really good about?
Yeah, the fact that he's got some healthy guys, and Trey Wisner made it all the way through. He was banged up a little bit. Jaden Blue gave them so much last year, and the Dallas Cowboys obviously noticed that for them to go after Blue. And C.J. Baxter, his freshman year was so exciting, and so there was so much excitement about him before he had the injury that took him out for the whole year. But he's back, and Christian Clark is another guy who can step in there and do it. So they're excited about what they have in the backfield there. Hopefully, if Baxter is able to have a full recovery and go full out, then I think they have high hopes for him. There was another thing Sark told me when I asked him about health. He said there's only 1 or 2 guys that could be a lot slower on the path back in fall camp workouts. Just about everybody else. He said, now, we would be crazy to say, C.J. Baxter, go out there and just blast away right from the first day of camp. It's going to be a process, but he does like what he has with him there.
Yeah, I want to touch on, you were talking about the offensive line a little bit, kind of a question mark on that. And that's one thing I think that a lot of people probably noticed in the games that there weren't very many, but in the games that Texas did struggle in a little bit last year was pass protection, that kind of stuff, obviously against Georgia, which I know a lot of people struggled with Georgia's defensive line last year. So I guess how is it looking throughout this offseason? How did spring go? How does Sark think the spring went as far as offensive line?
Well, and it goes back to that depth question, Brent, when we were talking about building up the quality depth there, so that a guy like Cole Hudson, who wasn't technically a starter last year, but played a lot of snaps, can be ready to go. Neto Omeazulu, also another guy who can step in there. Brendan Baker's a guy. Trevor Gooseby had to play in key moments when Kelvin Banks was out. So there's guys who had a lot of snaps, even though they weren't quote-unquote starters other than Campbell. So there's a good feeling about what's there.
Absolutely.
Again, Craig Way, the voice of the Texas Longhorns. Appreciate you taking some time with us and looking forward to the big one at Ohio State to start things off at the end of August.
You know what? 20 years ago, Texas went into Columbus, and they had some stuff to prove. USC was the unquestioned number one team in the country, but Texas knew that if they could find a way to win that game, and Ohio State was number 2 at the time, and if they could go in there and find a way to win that game, then they'd have a path toward playing for the national title. They beat Ohio State, and then they were, as I like to say in NASCAR, running in clean air. They were out in front of everybody else other than USC all the way to the Rose Bowl. Well, now I think it's safe to say that either Texas or Ohio State will probably be number 1, and who isn't number 1 will be number 2. I know this. Whoever wins that game is probably going to be number 1, but there's still a path for whoever loses that game because of the high profile and high stakes venture that it is, that unlike 2005 where only the top 2 are going, 12 get into the playoffs. So it's a great test, but it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all.
And I will tell you that Mr. College Football, Mr. Tony Barnhart himself yesterday said he sees Texas going in and upsetting them in the horseshoe.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, if he said it
yesterday, so
if Mr. College Football said that, if Tony Barnhart said it, it must be true.
Yep.
I'll take his word for it.
Absolutely.
Greg, appreciate the time.
Thanks, Colin.